you again, Beatrice, and a very good afternoon to you all, our distinguished guests. Thank you for staying to be a part of this very important conversation. Today's conversation is centered on defending democracy in the age of disinformation, with a particular focus on priorities for media development institutions in Ghana and West Africa over the next 5 years. I believe almost all, if not, all the speeches that have been read and been shared earlier have set a very good foundation and premise for this conversation. And so I will not go into the context. But what we will do on this panel is to, beyond diagnosing the problems, also discuss the solutions on the way forward. And we have assembled a panel of experts to drive this conversation. And so I'd like to introduce them now. Please, I'll start with just a minute, sorry. I'd like to start with Dr. Kojo Asante. He's the director of Policy Engagement and Partnerships at CDD. He's a legal policy and governance specialist. He has over 21 years of experience promoting democracy, elections integrity, rule of law, and anti-corruption in Ghana and Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kojo Asante. Next is Professor Abena Yeboah-Benin. She's the Dean, University of Ghana School of Information and Communication Studies, I beg your pardon, and an Associate Professor at the University of Ghana Department of Communication Studies. Her interests as scholar, researcher, advocate, and practitioner straddle the areas of brand communication, media development, and gender in media. Her influential projects include the State of Women in the Ghanaian Media and the State of Ghanaian Media. Abena, you're welcome. Joining us as well is Mr. Suleiman Abrahima. He's the Executive Director at Media Foundation for West Africa. His leadership has introduced a number of innovative projects within his organization, including the Fourth Estate, Fact Check Ghana, the Next Generation Investigative Journalism, and WAMECA, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with, which is to promote journalism excellence across the region. Welcome, Sule. Also joining this panel, I'm delighted to have Selassie Koviseram. He's a media and innovation leader, investigative producer, and entrepreneur. He's the founder and CEO of a tech company, Trapo. He's also a past founding member of Al Jazeera's Africa's Investigates team, a producer for the BBC Africa Eye series, and previously led operations and strategy at the Tiger Eye Foundation, which was helping to strengthen one of Africa's leading investigative journalism organizations. Welcome, Selassie. And finally, we have Manasseh Awuni. Manasseh is an investigative journalist and author, and he's demonstrated the enduring value of accountability journalism in Africa. He's a strong advocate for anti-corruption and injustice, and his authorship includes works like The Fourth John and The President Ghana Never Got. Welcome, my distinguished panelists. So, over the next 80 minutes or even less, we would be discussing this topic that I've introduced already. I'd like to start with you, Kojo. Across much of West Africa, the conversation that everybody is on everybody's tongue is that democracy is dwindling. I know that Afrobarometer has a round of surveys that has shown that public perception on good governance and democracy is indeed declining. What would you say has caused this public disillusionment towards democracy in Ghana and across West Africa?
Thank you, and very good morning to everyone. Let me first of all congratulate Dubawa and Cjid for 7 years of impactful work. I mean, I have worked closely with Dubawa since it started, and I can say that the work has really been impactful. So congratulations. And really, when Tunde was talking about the next set of actions, I was really happy because there were things in there that I was looking for that I already saw, and I'll probably talk a bit about them. What has caused this? I think a lot of the speakers have already alluded to this. George Sapon talked a bit about the disappointment of democracy not delivering development. And there are certain things that, of course, have happened if you look at the timeline, and I think has really exacerbated this problem. Particularly, I think COVID was a huge challenge for the continent, but also globally. Already before that, there was this disillusionment with globalization. A lot of people felt excluded. And so in Europe and in other places, there's already agitation around this, what globalization promised us. And then, COVID hits, and then you got more exclusion, even after the fact. But at the same time, you also got a rise in authoritarianism, because at any point in time when there's contestation for inclusion, for access to services, for opportunities, and more people get excluded, then everybody's looking for somebody to blame. And then those who are in power also see the opportunity to grab more power. And I think we've seen that in the West Africa sub-region, coups have returned. Some people even say, well, we've always had coups with us, so maybe it's not such a new thing. But certainly, the problem is that we are increasingly seeing closing of the civic spaces. At the same time, the governments are also not delivering. So if you look at the Afrobarometer, satisfaction with democracy is at the lowest since Afrobarometer started doing its surveys in 1999. And then people are not now even looking at alternatives, particularly young people, say military rule. They are ready to try military rule. And that is really scary. So the challenge is difficult, but I don't see that this threats to democracy are going to change anytime soon. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we manage to and then navigate this really challenging environment that is probably going to be with us for a while? And then how do we come out of it at the end when maybe things settle, Because the reason why I say it is going to be more challenging is that these contestations and the changing global environment, the geopolitics, it's not going to redress itself very soon. And then you have technology that is continuing to be disruptive. So if those are the drivers, I don't see how it settles immediately. And our solutions then have to consider all of that going forward.
Right. Thank you so much, Kojo. And because you mentioned that democracy is not delivering on development, I think it's important that we establish something that has been on my mind for a long time. Is it that democracy is not delivering on development, or that people are rather dissatisfied with bad governance? I think it's important to make that distinction. So are people rejecting democratic ideals, or they are just dissatisfied with bad governance?
So this is a very good question. So for me, when I talk about democracy, I'm talking about the right to choose your leader, the right to consent to leadership. These are fundamental human rights, fundamental rights about organizing society. So if anybody who says that, I don't like democracy, do you want somebody to come and impose themselves on you? Is that how you want to live in society? So when we talk about democracy, the question is, do you do that through one man, one vote, organize a very expensive election or whatever? But the principle is the same. Free press, these are all elements of democracy. And I think that's, but the issue is that whatever political organization you put in place, the whole idea is that you organize society in a way to pursue your individual welfare. If that is not happening, at some point, they will look at the political organization that maybe it's not for us. And then maybe when they compare it to other alternatives, they might look at China or look at Rwanda and say, but they don't have all these elections and stuff, but they seem to be progressing. So I think it is, in principle, it is not democracy that is the problem. It is how we have applied it and adopted it. But at the same time, the longer the organization, the political arrangements don't deliver development, somebody will question the political organization. And I think that's where people are. They are so desperate, they are prepared to say, forget it, let's try something else, because what we have is not working. And I take the different view is that no, rather look at why this is causing that problem, and then try and work towards it, because the alternatives you are asking for, they also don't deliver development.
Okay. I'd like Thank you. I'd like you to weigh in here, because the media is, a democratic institution and has played in a lot of ways many roles in ensuring that democracy is thriving, or democracy still has a footing in Africa and in Ghana more specifically. Could you point us to what the literature is saying? What role has the media played in all of this? Has it contributed to the decline, or has it rather sustained democracy in any way?
Thank you very much. And I join Kojo and everybody else in congratulating Cjid, and in particular Dubawa, for the work done so far. Yes, why ever not? Yes. But thank you again for the question. I think that it's important to understand the place of media in democracy. We've been told that it has a function in sharing information, which then citizens are supposed to use in making that decision that consents, or by which they consent to leadership. That being the case, I think that the media has an important role in this conversation about the waning trust in democracy. I think the puzzle is two-sided. It's not a straight-jacketed, yes, the media has contributed negatively, nor is it that it's contributed wholly positively. On the negative side, perhaps to acknowledge our truth. In fact, maybe let me deal with the positive side first. The expansion of the space so that I can say some, and you can say some, and in fact, we can sit on this stage and have this conversation. It's important and contributes meaningfully to the growth and sustenance of democracy. That being the case, therefore, having the kind of media space and liberalized media space we have is in itself beneficial to all of us. However, there are perhaps some fault lines that have developed along the journey of the democracy, particularly in Ghana. I don't know so much about other African countries. When the University of Ghana, we published the State of the Ghanaian Media Report in 2023, one of the findings from it was that our media, and in fact, I dare say that that report needn't even have come out before we knew this. We knew this in daily reckoning, that our media space is unnecessarily politically colored. And when it is unnecessarily politically colored, as we've managed to create for ourselves, everything becomes subject to debate along political lines. When that happens, the basis of truth that should engender trust in democracy becomes questioned, because who is saying it and what are their allegiances is the way we value the health of information, rather than what is the core truth in that information. And ultimately, the effect is the citizenry that then loses trust in democracy and democratic institutions. Then also the report established that our media is not financially healthy at all. If we are lucky, they break even. But for the most part, media organizations in the country are running at a loss. Your guess is as good as mine as to the dangers that brings to all of us, and also to the trust in democracy. Because the result is that sometimes maybe a bit too often, the ethical principles that should guide the professions in media are not exactly upheld, because ways and means must lead to survival. And so when you're thinking of bread and butter issues, ideals are not exactly your priority. And I think that that's one of the spaces we've been caught up in, a situation where our media is so financially handicapped that sometimes anything is good enough just to be able to bring in resources. We found also in that report, the section that was about working conditions, that most media personnel are working without any structured formal payment. And so when you go to an event and source where that money has become livelihood, it comes from a certain place where that money has become livelihood.
Conversation about how do we re-enable the journalistic media to be able to do the work that we think is important to be done for real democracy to thrive, to rebuild the trust that society must have. But the current situation where we have people running newspapers, blogs, and so on, and all they are doing is to also survive, create content in order to survive, and a few others trying to say, we will remain the journalistic media, want to focus on the truth, and so on and so forth. Fact-checking, we do it. When you do it, where do you post it? The platform that enables the misinformation are the same platforms that we finished and posted back there. And the algorithms are built such that what you put there as the truth is not highlighted. So we've seen this on Facebook, we've analyzed, it's not true. When you finish, where do you put it? Back into Facebook. Facebook says, look, yeah, but this one, people will not engage, so I deprioritize it. So I think it's a very complex situation that we are dealing with, but we need to really isolate the journalistic media and have perhaps a discussion on what we can do to ensure that they survive and thrive.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Sule. Selassie, particularly because Sule mentioned the latest challenge that's with the algorithms, and I know that you know a lot about digital production and storytelling and all that. Algorithms are posing a big threat to journalism. Let's be a bit more nuanced now, because Sule said we should make it clear between the media and journalism. It's posing a big threat to journalism, where, needless to say, the algorithm is now rewarding emotional reactions to situations rather than facts. This is a challenge to journalism. How would you suggest that practicing journalists now respond to this growing menace in the practice?
Okay, thank you. And thank you for, the organizers of this, very senior people in the profession that I've looked up to for much of my life. I'm glad to be part of this. So in preparing for this, I was just thinking a lot about the profession, which I haven't left. I mean, I'm just building a tech company now, but I've been thinking about, just the historical changes that have happened in world history up until now. And you think about journalism a lot, and you see that time and again, journalism has had to move a step further when there's some significant change, because we use technology to enable us as infrastructure to do things better, right? You're thinking about, say, the printing press. When the printing press, emerged in history, about 500 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, what it did for us is to help us accelerate what we do as journalists. And so we are able to, make copying easier, right? You also think about, the introduction of the telegram, which bridged distances, right? It allowed people to bridge distances so you can send information. I was chatting with Manasseh a little after the coffee break, because in 2008, that was when I was really thinking about being a journalist. And we happened to be in school around the same time. It just appeared that the profession that inspired us to go into school, by the time we were out of school, it had changed significantly, right? And that had changed because of what, Sule had alluded to, this Instagram, by then Facebook had just emerged. And I think Google was also there, and they were playing in the same space as we played, right? Journalism, when you think about the first principles of it, you go back to the history of Reuters. What do? We provide information for people to make certain decisions about their lives, right? Period. When you think about journalism, what is it meant to do? Whether it's letting people know this is the candidate you're voting for. And so time and again, when technology comes, it allows us to accelerate our work. It just happened that what has happened since 2008, which for me, the more I think about it, I feel like that's where things changed, was there was just so much information, which we were the gatekeepers of. And since then, we haven't been able to just adapt as much as we had done previously. And so with algorithms, as you're talking about, I think Facebook and the rest have gotten us to play their game significantly instead of playing the game that we're good with. And I think the game that media is good with is to be able to say that, okay, this is what you can trust, right? And so if we missed a bit of that 2008 evolution, we have an opportunity now with AI. And, we're not competing necessarily. Journalism is not competing with journalism. That's what I think. I think we are competing with TikTok. We're competing with influencers. We are competing with creators. But what we are supposed to do is to let people, how do we get people to make, valuable decisions about their lives? We have to move a step further and go like, we're no longer the breaking news people. You can never compete with Twitter about breaking news, right? But what can you do? I've been a practicing journalist for some time. Manasseh has done, a bunch of us here have done. What we have to do is to tell people, this is what you can trust. And that's how you're able to hold politicians to account, right? You're able to go like, okay, we're no longer playing your game. This is us as journalists. We're able, because people want to know, can I trust this? There's so much information. And I think it's about time we move a step further and go like, okay, the internet is helping us with all this information. How can we help synthesize stuff, right? That's where fact checking comes in. To be able to tell people that, okay, this politician told you they're going to deliver this to you. Trust me as someone who is in the media, because I'm no longer the person who is giving you an overload of information. I'm no longer the person who is giving you breaking news. What I'm helping you with is to understand what's going on, right? If you tell me why there's a political coup in Burkina Faso, you should trust me as a journalist to tell you these are the historic things you think about. It's good. We can't go and compete with, say, a Woody Maya, who could be given the platform to go like, okay, it's great that we have someone in power in Burkina Faso, help people understand, the historical timelines. And so I think it's about time we start reviewing what we need to do as journalists. And the more I go into it, the more I think through it. And I think what we have to do is to tell people, these are the things you need to make decisions about your life. You think about the emergence of Reuters, for instance, right? It was because they needed to provide information for people to know about stock exchange. And so that's how Reuters came about. And I don't think that has changed significantly. What we lost in 2008 when Facebook emerged and Google became the main thing, we shouldn't play their game. We should become the people that they would need to be able to synthesize information for them about everything else. So those are my initial thoughts.
Thanks, Selassie. Manasseh, I want to come to you now. We've heard a lot about what the problem is, what the problem could potentially aggravate to. We've also heard about, Abina mentioned a lot about trust in the need for trust in democratic institutions. We've heard about some of the challenges, the constraints with the media, tech, the algorithm, and all of that. Because you are still a practicing journalist, it's very important that you point us to the right direction. What would you say is the biggest hindrance to your work in the face of technology, in the face of funding, in the face of all the challenges that we have outlined? What would you say is the biggest challenge or threat to your work?
Thank you. Since almost everyone starts by congratulating Dubawa, let me also start by congratulating Dubawa. And all I have to say is that we will need more Dubawais, so we need more the JIDs and the media foundations and the fourth estates. And that brings me to my what we have as a challenge. the biggest challenge is that the journalism as we knew it is no longer effective against the threats that we have. Some years ago, if someone was traveling from, let's say, Tamale to Accra and came upon an accident in Techiman, they could pass the night in Kumasi, eat fufu, come back to Accra, and it will still be breaking news. But as we speak, there is a media house in Ghana whose tagline is first in news, best in entertainment. And I dare say that if there's an accident today in front of that media house, they will not break the news. Someone else has to break that news. Now, the challenge is many media houses and owners want us to compete with that. So, the speed. And not only does it cause us to make mistakes, but it is practically impossible. The system is driven by the number of clicks, the number of likes, whether on social media, YouTube, and all. So it becomes very difficult to cope with the speed. There is also the challenge in the past. As a journalist, you used to be responsible for what you said. You used to defend or cross-check what you have reported. Now you have to cross-check what others have said and what others say about you that you did not say. I go to post something on social media today. Oh, a liar. You said the guinea fowls flew to Burkina Faso. The guinea fowls didn't fly. And I said, no, I never said that in my documentary. Others said it. Oh, but what did you say when they said it? So it becomes a difficult terrain. But I see all of this as the bigger challenge. It's not just the few individuals. I think there is the serious effort by the powers that be to also undermine what we do so that they thrive. And when we talk about the headquarters of democracy, we know where it is. When we talk about media freedom, we know where the headquarters is. And today, that same great country of the world is the headquarters of disinformation. And it is very difficult for us to even see some of the best examples. When I'm talking about democracy, recently there were some arrests and detentions based on a law, and I went to write about it. And then if you read many of the comments, you are in America speaking nonsense, say that in America today and we see what will happen to you. So it has become a global challenge. And now it appears those who want to do the right thing are seen as the wrongdoers. The Fourth Estate not long ago published a story about the big push, single source procurement. And if you went under the comments, it appeared they sponsored some political party thugs to just go down there. Hundreds of comments, all insults, attacks, and harassment. And if you don't have a very strong character, if you are not very strongly convicted, this might be your last investigation. And not that the story was wrong, everything was correct. So all of these point to the issue that Professor Abner spoke about, that the trust. They're making everything for whatever you say to be doubted. And once that happens, you'll be fighting for what you've done. You are fighting for what you have not done. You are fighting for what others have done that they want to impose it on you. So it becomes very difficult to even, I think credibility is the most important tool we work with. And that is what is under the attack when we talk about these things. And for me, it is very important.
Thanks, Manasseh. Kojo, I want to come to you, back to you. Manasseh mentioned something very important about sometimes journalists being stifled because of the powers that are. Because I know that constitutional reforms is your turf. Do you think Ghana is due for a reform in this regard Do you think we need some changes to set things in the right motion, or we are good as it is? We only need critical implementation of those already existing.
Yeah, thank you. No, I've just been listening to everyone, and I think maybe because they are journalists or media developers, they are looking at the changing dynamics and how you respond to those changing dynamics. How do you also adapt to some of the disruptions that are going on? But in terms of how we respond, there are some really fundamental issues that I think we have to confront together. And that's why I really like the stakeholders that are gathered here, because what I think it needs is, goes beyond media. Because as you say, we're talking about democracy, good governance, we're talking about development, how we organize our society, how we live a prosperous, decent life. These are kind of basic things to our human existence. And when we come to that, when you think about something like information integrity, it is not even a question of just journalism. If you're a business person and you are operating in an environment where there is disinformation, the likelihood that whatever you are selling, somebody can go and put something out there and completely your business is destroyed one day. Right? So it's not just about Manasseh who is, but it's happening all the time. One of the biggest problems the banking sector has is fraud online. So for me, we have to conceptualize. I think the technology sometimes almost changes our conception of what is public and private. But what is happening online is just that the public sphere has moved online. We are all basically living in the society online. So it's still not right that if somebody was to do that, somebody was to go and shout, oh, the people who are selling wache here, they have put some poison in there, whatever, and everybody stops going to buy the wache. We will say that is wrong. You can't do that online and still be acceptable. So information integrity is important to everybody in society. And that is one thing that we all have to work together. How do we make sure that there's credibility, that people are held accountable when they, perpetuate these kinds of violations against society, against societal norms and so on and so forth. And then the other thing that I think is important is all these algorithms that, the social. So if you take, I take all those platforms as public goods. It's like those times when we used to look at what's the biggest company in Ghana, or I don't know, Nestle or whatever. Nestle is a private company, but if it has a certain level of monopoly on the goods that it supplies, we consider it almost like a public company, because whatever it does, it has such a huge impact on our lives that we cannot just allow Nestle to do whatever it likes. The same way, we cannot allow Facebook to do whatever it likes, because everybody, and these days, it's even worse than before. When we used to consume information, maybe from GBC or whatever, we had multiple. Now you have just 5, 6 platforms, and they are all owned by one person. And that person can wake up one day and decide that he doesn't like this. Everybody, I'm blocking you from accessing this, and so on and so forth. That is even a scarier ownership model than we used to have. So that cannot happen. How do we have to work around it together, because if we do not solve that problem, then I see us basically just being reactive. It's almost like, like what we are trying to do with our flooding, right? We wait every year, it's almost perennial, and then we kind of organize ourselves trying to respond to the flood. I don't think that is a solution for us. The structuring processes that generate these problems for media, for truth, for integrity in society have to be confronted. That cannot be done by countries or Manasseh alone. Sometimes I see the number of times Manasseh posts. It's exhausting. When I post anything, I don't even look at comments. I don't even, whether you read it or you don't read it, it's your problem. But journalists now have to keep responding because there is almost a dynamic around how information is communicated. You cannot, artificial intelligence may do that because they don't sleep, but you have to sleep. So I don't see that as a sustainable. We need to confront these infrastructure. George will tell you when it comes to information infrastructure and so on, it's literally dominated by one country. There is no accountability mechanisms around that. So how are we going to confront that? So what I'm saying is that I accept that journalists have to pivot and they have to respond to the changing dynamics. But I think as a collective, there are certain fundamental issues that we have to confront. Otherwise, I don't see how we generate the right incentives and the right environment to promote information technology. And then that's all external. Just a small point about the internal part. The business model part, I think, is so important. Mm-hmm. And I don't see that we are doing that enough. That's why, as I was saying, I saw that in Tunde's work. I don't see us having a panel like this of CEOs of media houses or whatever, talking about how we can improve conditions for journalists, for media people, and so on. We really need to invest in making media sustainable, profitable, so that you can have careers and the next generation of journalists and truth protectors and so on. So thank you.
Thank you, Kojo. Abena, while we are still on the subject of changes, reforms here and that, would you say capacity building is doing enough? Or perhaps broadly education?
How do you want me to answer it without setting a trap for what I do and then my university will sack me from my job? There is a big gap. Maybe that's a politically correct way to put this. No need for political correctness. Truth of the matter is that we are not meeting the need as fast as should be. So as you listen to all the conversations here, the demon we're dealing with is hydra-headed, is multidimensional, is very rich in nuance and dynamic, and it's changing even before we get to understand it. And that makes the job of preparing ourselves to exist and thrive in it, Sule's word thrive, very difficult, because even before we know how to position ourselves, things have changed. And you started with capacity building and went to education. I think when you said education, you had universities in mind. So I'll deal with that part first before I come to the broader space of capacity building. Without crying over something I should be solving, because I know it's part of our responsibility as university, I'd like to also invite a thinking around the pace of curriculum evolution within, in fact, all industries really, but particularly so ours, because as Sule has acknowledged, the space of media has really expanded and changed its face. The curriculum we run presently needs changes to make it relevant to the future. We can't even worry about now, because the now is guaranteed to change in just a couple of years. But to be forward looking, this morning on our way here, Aurelia and I were having a conversation about what new programs must we be doing? Because even before you finish thinking about what you need to do, there's a new problem that you must now think of another solution for. And the curriculum review development processes in our public universities. There's quite a bit of bureaucracy surrounding it, and it sometimes can make it a bit difficult to move fast enough. I'm happy to say that at the University of Ghana, even in the midst of such bureaucracy, I think that over the past few years, we've been quite proactive in addressing some of these challenges and the solutions that they require. I'm sure that across today's conversation, we've all heard often the term media and information literacy thrown in as a solution. And we're running a course on that as part of our curriculum. In fact, we offer it as a course to level 100s across the university. We have a media and information literacy club. The patron is the one sitting there, Aurelia. So there's quite some work in that space. We're revising our curriculum. We're introducing a course that targets AI because people working in the communication space need to understand the face of the technology to be able to even navigate it. But I dare say that it's not fast enough, and maybe even there is more scope to cover than we already are being able to cover. There's certainly opportunity to think a bit wilder and more innovatively and expand what we offer. On the larger capacity building space, I know that quite a bit goes on. At the very least, we've been involved in doing capacity building outside of our classrooms for people in industry, etc. We've partnered Dubawa to do this, and we are not the only ones. Virtually every media development organization in the country is doing something to build somebody's capacity on some problem or other. And perhaps the issue there is just how siloed some of these attempts at building competencies may have been. Whether there's a risk of even serving the same people in different training activities, etc. But also the scope of things that we are addressing in some of these capacity building opportunities may also be one that we would have to look out for. But I think that going forward, a bit more collaboration among all of us may perhaps help us to yield even better impact with however little training there is. And because the issues we're dealing with go beyond persons working in media or journalists or information professionals, news professionals, as the case may be, then the training and capacity building shouldn't also perhaps be focusing on only the professionals, because the wider society is also consuming information, news, and otherwise. And the resources with which they come to such consumption. If you look around, you see that even where we're talking and training around media and information literacy outside of professional spaces, it's a university level thing. But other people are consuming information, other people exist in the information ecosystem. Who is taking care of their media literacy training needs? So there are so many issues that you end up playing the challenges, but there are also opportunities for using capacity building to improve things. Just that perhaps a bit more synergy in what the different layers are doing, and also a faster pace within the educational settings in evolving, in changing what we are offering in preparing people.
Thanks, Abena. Sule, I'd want you to add to what Abena has started. She's mentioned that, of course, there should be a change in curriculum to, integrate more of these challenges into how the media, or the journalists, rather, are being trained. And even beyond that, every information consumer. I think, one, because we are still talking about what we've done in the past, what we are doing right, what we are not getting right, and what we could improve on, how would you suggest that we navigate this issue of training professionals who get the required skills to improve on the job, to tackle all the issues that we're having to deal with, but go back to their newsrooms, and because of the newsroom culture, it's as if they haven't been trained at all. And so, like, back to ground zero, how do we navigate that complexity? Because we are training. Education seems to be one solution, but they go back and there's all the dynamics of newsroom culture that negates almost everything that has been handed over to them.
Well, that's again another difficult question. Over the years, at Media Foundation for West Africa, for example, I would say that maybe 70 to 80% of our budgets have always been into what we would call capacity building. Sometimes not by our choice, but the donor says, I want capacity building. So you do the best that you can, and we've tried multiple models, either bring people to 3-day capacity building workshop, and you are told, well, only 3 days, you can't change much. Why don't you limit the number and make it a 1-week capacity building workshop, or even 2 weeks? Or why don't you now try a model where you take the trainer to a newsroom, so the trainer trains them, so that everyone in the newsroom benefits from the capacity building, so that if tomorrow Maxine was the one who was invited to the Accra training workshop, and Maxine has gotten a better corporate job and left the media house, will still have the benefit of all the other people who were trained. So we've done all that. Now, the reality is that in 2016, ahead of the elections, we had a group of very eminent persons put together for engaging the media across the country on issues of ethics, on issues of hate speech, and so on. In almost all the places that we visited, whether in Tamale, which is the biggest city in the north, Kumasi, which is the second city in our country, or Accra, there was one thing in common. In Tamale, there was not a single media we visited that had been able to pay the salaries of its staff up to the point that we were there. In fact, we were told by one, we do well. We only owe our people maybe 3 months. We do well. Kumasi, the story was the same. Even here in Accra, the capital, where you would say there are economic possibilities for media to survive, is the same. And so a lot of the people who are in the newsrooms some of them are there because they just don't have any alternative jobs. And so the journalism provides them the opportunity to interface with people, to either get social capital that can then catapult them onto other opportunities. That's the reality. That's the reality. A lot of people are in the newsrooms because they just don't have an alternative. So it comes down to people who want to do journalism and their heart is in it. But before I say that, just to illustrate the point I made earlier, Manasseh is here. Manasseh has done, as an individual, stories that have resulted in the country saving millions of cedis. The Fourth Estate has been doing stories that, people are facing prosecution, contracts are being reviewed, contracts are cancelled, and so on and so forth. But at every stage, you would get people who would agree to come and attack you for what you are doing, because what you are doing may be damaging a Zoom Lion or a Jospon or a Magdan or a KGL or whatever it is. So the big corporates and what they can do, or even the government, sometimes it's government sponsored. I think that, for example, Manasseh cited the example of Big Push, so everybody is on there. Oh, what we want is our road being done. So long as the road is being done, no problem. The minister says, look, we have deliberately selected contractors with capacity. Even when their own contracts they have signed indicates that some contractors have 1 staff, 2 staff, and so on and so forth. What happens? The following 2 weeks or so, the minister is on the road, inspecting, and then dealing with, why are you not delivering? Why are you not delivering? But you said you have given the contract to contractors with capacity, but they can get people who come and then, deliberately come after you. Then the president says, I want to investigate. Yes, investigations are done, and we are talking about big push. The report comes that the presidency says the ministry has awarded multiple contracts. You go in and they are talking about contracts for pothole filling, road patches, and so on and so forth. And they'll get the social media people to still come after you. So the next time we do a story about street lights at Nkrumah Circle Dubai that is not working, within 2 weeks, it is fixed. Then people come, first they say, these are the things you should be doing. Stop the big push things. But big push is about millions. One big push alone is over 5 billion Ghana cedis. That's almost $500 million. Why should we leave this and be talking about, maybe the potholes that are about 1 million and so on and so forth? But people will come after you. So it calls for resilience. If you happen to have the people whose hearts is in journalism and they want to do it, then you'll be successful with your training. But otherwise, you would invest so much in the trainings, and we have been doing it. Recently, we've been doing the Next Generation Investigative Journalism Fellowship, where we say, okay, catch them young, train them, groom them, and all of that. But if you don't have the character, the resilience to say, this is my chosen profession, I want to do it and do it well, I don't think that we would really go far with the capacity building. And unfortunately, that is where a lot of the resources are channeled, because sometimes it's about the numbers. How many people have you trained? The donor, 400 people, and what came out of it is another matter. So that for me is the complexity.
There's never enough time to dissect all these issues, and because we are running out of time, I'll just want us to just quickly tell us what we should focus on. So maybe Selassie, I'll start with you, particularly with big tech, with all that is happening with algorithms and all that. How would you suggest that? Because we've been trying to push to get them on board as part of the stakeholders in these kinds of conversation, but it's proved somewhat difficult. Are there tips to their response? Are there tips to still navigate this? What should we be doing? What should journalists be doing? What should information consumers be doing?
No, thank you. So the whole thing about AI, right? I think for me personally, being a journalist, when this whole onslaught of AI being here came on, I had to try to just understand what's AI, right? And I think the biggest revelation was, as journalists, we've been told time and again that with our work, we are writing the first draft of history, right? What AI ultimately has revealed to us was we were also drafting future technology and intelligence. And what do I mean by that? AI would not give you any valuable response if it doesn't have great data. And for a long time, we've always been the people who have curated and archived all of this, right? To be able to produce that. And so the more I think about what's happening with big data and how we are ultimately seeing it as something that's so far away from us, I don't think it's necessarily far away from us. I just think we just need to think or rethink how we operate, right? It's important that we operate as an ecosystem, not just thinking about, one media organization competing with the other, but okay, if I'm in Ghana and I have a bunch of people in the audience that I've worked with in Nigeria, where as we were working on this MacArthur Foundation project, it was more of a cohort where you're working with people in civil society organizations, you're also working with people in the media. If there's a story in Nigeria, I call Muskilo in Premium Times, he helps me with it. It's important that we think about this as something that we're building together instead of something that, we have to almost sort of compete with each other, right? There's also the question about, as Philip was mentioning, the barriers of entry into journalism is pretty low, right? You could wake up and because you want to be on TV, you just want to be a journalist, right? And so the motivations are quite different for most people. I think it's important that we begin thinking about what is moving people to action these days and how can we use those things to improve how journalism impacts society. I always make reference to what happened in Nigeria in 2020 with NSAS. For the first time in our history, or in the history of the African continent, which is like very youthful, you realize that what happened with the mobilization on the ground, it wasn't necessarily journalists. Journalists did their stories, but you saw people in tech who were interested in driving society. All of a sudden, they started mobilizing. They started taking videos. Influencers were there. Musicians were there. It means that these people do care about the growth of society, which is ultimately what we do as journalists. It's important that we find ways of including them without necessarily wanting to own them, right? I'm building a company now where the people who contribute significantly to what we build are not necessarily people that we employ, because they do care about contributing to society, right? You bring it back to Ghana, for instance, you're thinking about, and I know some of these things are quite controversial, but you're thinking about the Fix the Country movement, right? It didn't just emerge from newsrooms. It emerged from people who were lawyers, who were just, angry, or just, they were disturbed about things that were going on. They decided to do it, right? You think about Galamsey, which is an issue that's quite important. We don't just have journalists, we have influencers lending their voice to it. So it's important that, the whole idea of community, which is what we're here to do. We've seen people who are policymakers, we've seen people from embassies, they care about these things. What would it look like to have an influencer here saying that, okay, they were part of this cohort, they were part of this event, they use it to sort of understand how some of these things work, and then they send it to other people. Because like we keep saying, our role has changed significantly and we need to adjust, right? Back to my first point, I think that if we are ultimately, and it's true, if you want to understand AI, we're the people who have fed AI, right? Because AI has, before they fed the large language models, they've had to like photocopy newspapers, like a bunch of books and all of that. Ultimately, we're the ones writing those. Can we step in to be curators, where we partner with other people who can help us make some of these systems as strong as possible? And if we can do that, I think that we would always emerge as people who are not necessarily destabilized completely by new technologies, but we are able to come back to our core, our center, which is helping society advance, which is helping people make decisions about, what to do or where to go next. You think about, like the history of the weather reports. We give weather reports so farmers decide whether or not to go to the farm today, or people decide to come out or not to come out. These are things that technology has enabled. And if we're able to like just not be caught up in the whole idea of breaking news, not be caught up in the whole idea of rivalry between newsrooms, and we understand that we are all in this together, we'll be able to build communities which, just breaks the divide between academia, practitioners, people within the tech world as well. Because if we keep blaming people within tech, when you call them for this, they won't come, because they fear that we might hound them, right? So it's important that we understand that we are collaborators in this and we adjust. Because when you think about it, Google, they did all the work they did. All of a sudden, they started giving grants to media organizations. And it's because they got blamed over and over again. But we need to be a bit more strategic in thinking through that.
Right. Thanks, Selassie. Manasseh, sorry to give you very, very limited time to respond to this, but I trust that you can do this in 1 minute. In 1 minute, can you tell us what interventions would produce measurable impact? What should we focus on?
I think we should focus on what we can do best. We cannot compete with those platforms in terms of speed. And there is this saying that if you cannot beat them, join them. I say if we cannot beat them, we shouldn't join them. There will always be the demand for good, accurate information. This false news has a very short shelf life. That's the reason PMP died and the Chronicle is still surviving. So my point is that we should stick to what we can do. Even those who spread false news and others, there comes a time they also want accurate information. There is something that bloggers cannot do. There is something that influencers cannot do. There is something that those who call themselves content creators cannot do. That is the work the Fourth Estate can do. That is the work Dubawa can do. That is the work Corruption Watch and the CDD can do. So I think for the media to remain relevant, let us play to our strength and stick to deep, investigative, even if it's not investigative in nature, whatever you're producing, take the time and come up with quality content. There will always be the demand for that kind of news.
Thanks, Manasseh. Kojo, also under 1 minute, can you tell 30 seconds, yes, that works. So in 30 seconds, can you tell us what we should focus on?
So I think I'd made the point about the bigger infrastructure. I think we have to work on that collectively. I think it will be hard to try to just keep reacting. So just to emphasize that point, I also say that it's important to deal with the business model issue, the viability of media houses and so on. What I would like to see, and I'm hoping that Bawa or media support groups, is that we get to a point, because the question about truth matters, credibility matters, that I have an app on my phone, just like when we used to have fake drugs. M-Pedigree developed an app where you could check whether the drug was fake or not. To have an app, when I see something and I think that it might be fake or not, there's a way in which I can check without, having to sort of go to a website or wait for Dubawa to send something. So almost it becomes part of our daily lives, that there's a mechanism through which everyday users of information can check whether something is accurate or not.
Sule, where should our investments go? Money-wise.
I think our money should be going into the areas that would allow us to have deep reflections to create the eventual solutions that would work, rather than the current situation where things are prescriptive. I was in a meeting 2 weeks ago with a funder who said, after some time, I've come to believe that this whole thing about what's your theory for change or theory of change, it says, I cannot sit here and prescribe what is going to happen in the next 5 years. But you are developing a project and you are required to prescribe your theory of change that if this happen and that happen and that happen, then this will happen in the next 5 years. I think if we have the opportunity to have resources that allow us to have a deep reflection, to be able to confront the issues in a way that is not driven by some other pressures, but by our own findings, that would help. The other thing is perhaps it's time for us to come together within the ECOWAS sub-region, bundle together and say, we want to engage with these tech platforms to be able to have our way in terms of what we think would work for us. If the EU has the Digital Services Act, Germany has had the Network Enforcement Act, and so on. I think in Ghana, if you do it, they can say to hell with you, we don't care about you. But collectively as ECOWAS, I am sure they're likely going to listen so that we can also have mechanisms that will tighten our space for democracy and for development.
Thanks, Sule. And Abena, I'll end with you, because now media literacy, digital literacy is looking like beyond just skills and competencies to have, but it's more like a civic responsibility. How do you think the curriculum for upskilling journalists or the media would look like in the next 5 years?
Before I answer that question, I want to answer the one you gave to Sule first. Where should the money go? I think it should come to me. Yes. No, it should come to me. I'm not trying to get him money. It should come to me. Yes. But where should the future look at? I think there is something to be said for closer collaboration between us on the academy side and industry and media development, the civic space. I think that if we can get to the day when Sule, in developing a project, has academia sitting as part of the process, co-creating the whole design of it, and the day also when I am thinking of programs to offer, I have Sule at table right from the beginning thinking, what competencies are you looking for? And how do I think around delivering that competency in the person I train? Things would be better. So I would say closer contact and more co-creation in what we are doing, which will be a nice way also for some of the money to come to.
Okay. Beatrice, I know that we are running out of time, but for the next 5 minutes, I'll just take 2 questions from the audience, if that's okay. Whoa, more than 2. Yeah, we can do 2 questions if you don't mind. Okay, Beatrice, there's a hand up there. And then the last one. Here. Please keep the introductions. Just ask the question to whoever you want to ask.
Ok. Merci, madame. Madame, merci beaucoup.
Merci à toi aussi.
Je peux parler français? Je peux parler français?
Oui.
Okay. But I am a francophone, but I will try to do small English. Am I allowed to do it?
Yes.
It's small English.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I introduce myself as Dr. Munkela Yakuba. I am the Cjid d'affaires of Niger Embassy. I am a Niger citizen, West Africa citizen, Africa citizen, and a citizen of work.
Excusez-moi, monsieur, vous pouvez parler en français, en sommaire?
No, I will talk English, not English, but small English. So that, first of all, I salute this good initiative coming from Cjid. It's wonderful. It's fantastic to hear these good ideas coming from the panelists. I salute their intervention. But I have one single question to ask for all the panelists. In observing what is doing in the world, we see that when we talk about democracy, when we talk about media, it is a marriage with a style of life, who is standing communication around all the activities of human being. It means that to go online, you have to communicate. And if we say communication, we say journalism, we say media, and so. I remember 5 years ago, I was at Turkey as a first consular of Niger Embassy, and at that occasion, I was invited to a conference which title is Communication, the big status of life. At that occasion, I was going on a definition, African definition of communication, of journalism, and so on. And I have said that in the past, traditional governance of Africa, not only West Africa, the journalism, the media was replaced by what we say in a Francophone area, griot. The griot is the one that got the role of communication in traditional governance. Because the griot has this capacity to take by the past, to talk by the past, to talk on the context and to talk for the future.
Sorry, sir. If you could just ask the question. Yes.
So, going to my question. Today, I am going to ask about what is the role of journalism in the area of diplomacy, international relations.
Okay.
What is the role? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll take the last one. Yeah, please ask. If you have the microphone, just please ask. So, yeah, the role of journalism in international diplomacy. Is that right? Okay.
Hello, good afternoon. Mine is not a question and also a contribution. And Suleiman, I thank you for...
So sorry, I can't even see you. But if it's a contribution, could
I'm tying it into a question, but I just wanted to also make a very important point.
Okay, in 1 minute, please.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I hope I can, yes. But for me, and my name is Benjamin Tete, I want to touch on the role of the platforms. And Suleiman, I thank you for bringing it to the tail end, the role. I am a journalist, but also academic researcher. And I guess we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but look at what is working elsewhere. And I'm glad that Suleiman referenced the EU. The EU is one of the platforms that is dealing with social platforms. And no wonder the US continues to criticize the EU in the name of free press. But all because they are handling the platforms or ensuring that there are laws that deal with. Facebook is fined millions of dollars by the European Union when they violate their rules. X is dealing with them equally. EU is dealing with X and all the platforms. I'll give the example of our big brother Nigeria. About 3 years or so when they had a major election and X clearly was promoting misinformation, or they are using their platforms to interfere in the elections in Nigeria. The Nigerian government had wanted to deal with X. They invited them. What happened? They never came. And Elon Musk is going to fly to Nigeria to respond to a Nigerian court? They won't. We had the only X office across Africa here in Ghana. Elon Musk came and shut it down. What am I saying? Ghana cannot deal with Facebook. Ghana cannot deal with X alone. Ghana cannot deal with TikTok. And how many Ghanaians are on these platforms? And how responsible are these platforms to our governments? We cannot do it as single countries. And I subscribe to Suleiman's point. My position, for example, would be, and I was talking to Ogadapo and Suleiman and the rest are here. If Media Foundation, Cjid, and the rest can partner, we could probably develop at least a document that will be turned into our regional body ECOWAS. I think it should go all the way to the continental body AU so that we can establish a kind of framework for dealing with social media, because we are losing the battle. It's not just a threat to journalism. As we are all espousing today, it's a threat to our very institutions of democracy. So to just conclude, I will be happy to join forces in terms of developing a framework. Let's table it to our regional body, like they say, the ECOWAS Parliament. Let's adopt it so we can force these platforms. If they can't have an office in Ghana and Nigeria, they should have one West African representation, so that when we want to deal with Facebook, we know where to go to.
Okay.
This is my crucial intervention.
Thank you so much for that contribution, even though we didn't get the question. But I think there's just one question to respond to. I'm not sure who's taking it. Whose expertise? Okay, Frawford.
Kojo insists that I should take it. Never mind the fact that he is with CDD. Okay, so the role of the media in diplomacy, I think, was the question. I think that the media, particularly the media of the world today, has a space in the diplomatic relations, etc., between countries, if nothing at all, to the extent that they carry the information upon which diplomatic relations are nurtured and diplomatic tensions are also resolved or escalated, as the case may be. and particularly so with the misinformation that may surround diplomatic tensions and how such misinformation may be given more impetus to thrive and to run even faster. But by that same token, therefore, all the things we've said here today about how the media can empower and facilitate democracy would stand also for the diplomatic space, because it can have positive implications for better diplomatic relations. But it's curious that he raises this question and it is brought to me, because actually at the Department of Communication Studies at the University of Ghana, we are having some conversations that would eventually lead to some convening around media diplomacy and peace. So maybe he's in the spirit.
Okay, we will end this.
Hello. I have a question here.
Oh dear. We took 2 questions.
You were saying 3.
No, we said 2 questions. We could, if you want to ask them a question, we have lunch after. So you would do well to just see the panelists. Yes.
Just brief, which I think it will help the public.
Can you do this in 20 seconds?
Yes, please.
20 seconds of
Yes.
timing.
As journalists, how do we ensure that victims of misinformation and disinformation knows that this information is genuine and this information is not genuine? Thank you.
That's why I proposed the app. I said we should get an app where ordinary citizens can check, just like we do with fake drugs and things.
That answers your question. Okay, so we'll conclude this panel discussion now. We still have lunch, networking opportunity. If you have any questions, please do well to approach any of them to have your questions answered. I think that we've discussed a lot. We just dissected the problems a lot, and we've discussed some possible solutions. And I think one thing stands at the center of it, that we need to come together more and find ways to handle this multifaceted problem as it is. And so thank you all for joining in, and do enjoy the rest of the program.